to a few of the volunteers that make this possible. Mic check, exactly. Mic check. Lovely. Let's do it. All right, so I don't know volunteers, but make Open Cinema possible. We're a community-run event. We operate on paper, and a lot of what we do is about volunteers who have been coming for years and years to help and who make our evening happen and make it very fun. So I'd like to say a big thank you to the following folks: Jack Fisher, Eleanor Calder, Alan McFlash, Joseph Kolsvik, Holly Patterson, Robert and Susan Thompson, Maria Glassford, Ellen Butcher-Morrison, sorry, I think I did mangle the name, Butcher-Morrison. Did I get that right? Ellen? Apologies. Elizabeth Matthews Stewart, Bill Wilson, and Ellie Dion from up here because everything bounces. From UBS. Which is a media resource center here in Victoria, offers workshops and equipment rental at extremely reasonable prices. They have some amazing new equipment you can rent for ridiculous prices. It's all about community and community sharing. So I would just like to say, acknowledge the media team. Peter Sandwell is the executive director. Where's Peter? There's Peter at the back. Thank you so much, Peter. Happy New Year. And the next one from the group that I am rising so thank you to our sponsors, Van City. We love Van City. Music Arts Council, Canada Council, Big Cheap Media, our new website, Hempin Company, longtime sponsor. They support us, we love them. Bobby Rose's Bakery, Birdwood Coffee, The Joint Pizzeria, Infuse Tea. And I also want to acknowledge we just joined forces with Social Coast, an amazing group. Collaborations with, but for this event, they have offered a couple of our Twitter team volunteers, our Twitter chat volunteers, Stacey White and Karen Michaels are here from Twitter. And coming into the chat team, I want to say a huge thank you to Angela Henry and Mary Wakefield, who together we've kind of been sort of making this thing happen, and we're getting some pretty awesome stuff happening tonight. In fact, we were having a conversation with Velcro during the film, and we were kind of relating to him the laughs, the comments, the stillness, the rapt attention, and he was just loving, feeling the energy in this room. If you can hear us, Velcro, it's been a real pleasure to kind of have this conversation with you behind the scenes of the film. It was actually pretty interesting. So, yeah, so is he up there? Well, he probably is. And thank you very much to viewers like you. Your donations at the door actually make up a huge part of our annual budget. So thank you very much for that. The next film, hopefully you've seen on the table in Organic We Trust on January 23rd, Wednesday, January 23rd. And we're doing that in collaboration with food groups as part of our ongoing Cinema in Season series. So we hope you'll come out to that. And we are very excited to have author and farmer Carolyn Harriott will be here for that event. And here's Velcro, live from New York City. Just in case you didn't hear Velcro, the audience is saying, we love Velcro. And there's something coming from Velcro from the Twitter sphere. And what's he got to say?
Big love to everyone in Victoria. I can feel the love from here in NYC.
Okay, so before we free level 1 training for January. I'm not sure what the dates are. Sometime in January 5th and 6th, but negotiable if you can't make that. But anyway, let's pick that number. Okay. So, roll, please. Very much. The last 3 numbers are 251. Do you have the last numbers 251? 251. Very once, 251. Third twice, 251. Third 3 times, 251. Does somebody have it? Once, twice. Then put the number 251. Okay, the last call of 251. That poor person went, come on. Okay, we'll try again. The last 3 numbers, 262. 262. Do we have, oh, I see somebody waving it up. 262. If you have 262, speak up. No. Okay. 262 go once, twice, third time. Okay. Let's pick that number now. The last 2 numbers, 3 numbers, 221. 221.
Don't worry, everybody else is seeing something. Just being
There are some green tickets. I'll take the green tickets. Okay, let's try 698.
Oh yeah, we put her friend since she started talking.
Okay, so now I want to introduce
No,
our
we're picking up
moderator
the microphone
tonight.
board.
I have been happy to know Rachel Dan for a number of years.
No, the mic's
what's
on.
it? No, I'll give you up just in a second. I've known Rachel for a couple of years, for a few years actually, but just in the last year or so, or maybe even the last couple of months, we just keep running into each other. So, Rachel is the president of Mindful Communication, and she is a workshop presenter, communication coach, specializing in conflict resolution and breakthrough conversations. And her lifelong interest in the role that culture and ecology play in transformational dialogues between people, I think, makes her an ideal person for tonight's conversation. She attributes her greatest paradigm-shifting learning from Dr. Marshall Rosenberg and Stephen Jenkinson. She became a certified trainer of nonviolent communication in 2002, and a couple of years ago she met Stephen Jenkinson, who is the subject of the MFB documentary Grief Walker, whose work about dying and his prominent views of healthy human culture struck a deep chord. I've also heard him talk, and if you do get the chance to hear Stephen Jenkinson, he's incredible. So Rachel is actually studying with him through his Orphan Wisdom School based in Ontario. So please help me to welcome this peacemaker, a poet, a modern mystic, a spiritual activist, and a visionary boat rocker.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
Use the trim a little bit.
All right, so we've got still some time this evening. I'm going to be bringing some guests up to the stage, and one of the things I'm going to just share that I printed off before coming this evening.
No, not yet.
Join the resistance.
We'll rise the levels on this one, but you basically keep the levels. When they start talking, you just leave these.
Of resistance to today's tedious, socially restricted, culturally constricted, humanly meaningless world. Fight against these
Okay.
cultural
We'll
restraints
ride
that would
levels on this
cripple and
one.
smother our
And the other
desires.
two,
So
we'll
fall
just
in
get
love
approximate
today,
levels and leave
with
them
men, with women,
because
with music,
people do
with
all kinds of
ambition,
weird
with
things on the
yourself,
stage.
with life, with love, fall in love.
So,
How
try and bring it up and get some feedback, but I was thinking of that.
How many of you have ever fallen in love? And if the person you fell in love with is with you tonight, this is your time to hold their hand and say, I remember. You want to follow, you know? So I'd like to invite our first guest, Ian McKenzie. And I just met Ian this evening for the very first time, although we are Facebook friends. So here's what I will share, is that Ian McKenzie is a new media producer based in Vancouver, BC. He holds a BA in Communication from Simon Fraser University and a diploma from Long Ridge Writers School Group. His work has appeared in the New York Times, National Geographic TV, CBC Documentary, Globe and Mail, Adbusters, and festivals around the world. He released his first documentary feature, One Week Job, in 2010, which received widespread media attention from the New York Times, CNN, and the film was aired on CBC Documentary Channel. He's also the co-producer, as you just saw, of Velcro River's Occupy Love. I'm going to share something, a little tidbit of something too. In 2004, Ian started a petition to get on Survivor. And he managed to collect 5,000 signatures for that. I'm not sure if I should say that I'm glad you didn't get on because you were able to put your attention to this particular project, which I'm really grateful for. So I'm really happy to have you here this evening. Welcome. I'll bring up other two guests as well, just to come and join Ian, and I'll introduce you as you're up here. Michelle. Okay, so we have Michelle Buchanan and Blake Matthews, who I'm meeting right now. All right. Now, I'm going to be asking you each a question. I'm going to introduce each person, but I have a question I'd like to add, for you to just add on to what I just said, Ian, if you have anything to add on, which is how is the work that you're involved with right now becoming a story? And here's the microphone. And then I'll introduce Michelle. Yeah.
So how does this work?
And anything else you want to add to what I just said about you that I think?
Okay, well, I'd say that one thing I noticed was, particularly around the Occupy movement, that I had a lot of friends that I considered to be activists that were sort of engaged in what's going on in the world, and I still felt in some ways that there was a standoffishness to participate in the Occupy movement. And it's not like they didn't have to. It's just that I was trying to understand what was holding them back. And what I realized, I think, in some respects, was that they didn't want to have their hearts broken. They did not want to care so deeply about something because of either a heartbreak that they already had, or because to open yourself up to care so deeply about something is a very vulnerable place to be. And that I believe that I think all the work that we need to do, this love story, as you saw one time on the wall there, it said love stories suck sometimes. And that we need to figure out how to engage despite being heartbroken, potentially over and over again. But we continue to do the work because it's the work worth doing.
Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Michelle Buchanan. Michelle is a writer, media activist, social media educator, and People's Assembly of Victoria, Occupy Victoria member. She has been published by the Globe and Mail, the Georgia Strait, Garden Wise magazine, Times columnist, Discovery Islander, Touchwood Editions, and others. This year she published a collection of short fiction, Growing Up, which you can find on her website. She has spent many years building up a homestead complete with goats, chickens, and gardens on Quadra Island, and which is now called Ravenwood Cottage. She lives presently in Victoria. We're lucky to have her here with her husband, their 2 children, and a cat. And so I'd like to ask you the same question, Michelle, about the work that you're doing and how it's becoming a love story. Thanks, Mandy, and all of you for being here, and all of you. First of all, I'm just really curious to know how many of you ever spent time in the square over a year ago. Wow, all right. That's a lot.
That's the problem. I kept trying to write the levels.
And thank you for Velcro and Ian and your crew for making such an inspiring film. I love the rich imagery and the broad vision. And to see ourselves or people just like us on screen is a very powerful thing. And wasn't it great to see our own image cut up there and everybody recognize it? So Mandy asked if I would, just speak from the heart for 3 minutes, and I said, oh, okay. But my natural inclination is to write, so I wrote what ended up being like 11 minutes of material. So I have just a very short little thing that the writer really just wants to read, and I hope you won't mind that. It's short, I promise, and I'll try to do well. So I like that you included in your film, Velcro, the reference to lateral organizing. Online, many of us have been realizing and developing these skills long before the first tents arrived in Zuccotti Square. Even by the time the revolution in Tunisia and Egypt began, the online world had hit its stride. We knew how to be supportive, and we went for it. There were people on the ground, WikiLeaks releasing cables, Anonymous taking down websites, telecomics enabling internet connections to the outside world when there were none, and a virtual sea of Twitter and Facebook users. There was no central leadership. We may not even have particularly agreed with each other in terms of tactics, but we focused our efforts, became engaged, and told the story of all that was happening both on and offline. And here is Andy Carvin in an attempt to explain the phenomena of what was happening on social media end of things, said that people stepped up online and participated in what he called random acts of journalism. And he used this phrase, I believe, because, and I agree with him, I saw this too, there was an aspect of kindness to the gesture of sharing information. And I think it came from the culture of the groups who were already there and already helping. As individuals huddled in the dark telling the story of the revolution via phones short on power or lacking internet access, and while others far away transposed tweets from landlines, translated, curated, relayed the information and more, there was compassion and passion. There was love. And what I don't think many of us saw coming was that in telling the story, we were becoming a part of it. At least in the sense that we were beginning to realize that there was a lot of us around the globe who shared the perspective that things weren't right. Yeah, we probably knew this already, but now we were getting to know each other. And what our collective power, especially combined with online tools now available to us, might accomplish. When the call to Occupy Wall Street happened, it tapped into our collective imagination of resistance. So we jumped on board again, at first online to support the few in Zuccotti Square, but then we took it out to the streets and parks and squares of our own cities and towns, as you saw in the film, and as many of you did by the sounds of it. From Hong Kong to the tundra. Do you remember that beautiful shot that got passed around off the tundra? One woman alone in the field. From my perspective of that lateral online organizing, I see that the motivation of others and myself is one of concern and passion and a genuine desire to turn things around to make this a better place for each other. So for me, being involved in the sharing and documenting of the story has been a love story, of which I'm one small yet essential participant, as each of you here today are an essential participant of what is a very far-reaching and, as it turns out, ongoing conversation. And it is the lateral nature of that conversation, of that sharing, of that way of organizing, the mutual respect and faith in each other that we can do this, that I'm especially fond of. And like the Birds and Velcro's film, there's an outbreak here of focus, of attention, of sharing and support, and then over there, and then there. But then there comes a synchronicity when circumstances surrounding one particular issue or event on the ground and online are just right. When a multitude of different variables line up and we find it possible to collectively propel the issue forward and make change. In building a culture of resistance, by engaging in the love story both on and offline. We learn how to support each other and how to organize in meaningful ways. And I've seen that when we do, we can make those moments of synchronicity more possible and more likely. Thank you. Our next guest is Leif Matthews. Good to meet you, Leif. All right, so say about you. Leif is the Senior Mortgage Advisor and Director of the Victoria Shambhala Center. He holds a BA in Economics from the University of Washington, an MBA from Dalhousie, and a certificate in Macroeconomic Policy and Management from Harvard. Very serious. Leif Matthews became a student of Buddhism and economics in 1979. He has been an authorized teacher and meditation instructor in the Shambhala Buddhist tradition for over 20 years. He is currently the director of the Victoria Shambhala Meditation Center here in Victoria and has been Senior Mortgage Advisor and CEO of Great Miser Mortgage Advisors since 2003. He is a member of the Enlightened Economy Group dedicated to exploring the connection between contemplative practice and prosperity at the household, organizational, and macroeconomic policy levels. He also goes by the name of Ratna Sultan. Can I say that right? Ratna Sultan, which means wealth king in Tibetan. I'm happy to be sitting beside you. So, how is your work presently creating a love story?
First, I want to know who wrote that bio. Well, my work, my entire life has a shaky quality to it, especially right now. Oh, sorry. And so it's like a love story because there's a sense of feeling very exposed and vulnerable and not knowing what's going to happen next. And so I have that going on in my financial sphere because we don't know what's happening with the economy to some extent. But also because something I've been longing for pretty much my whole adult life, which is the coming together of contemplative practice and economics and the sort of notions of prosperity is starting to actually become we're starting to gather some wide interest. And in a way that is subtle and intelligent enough that I feel really excited because I want to be involved in it on some level because it's kind of like a dream come true, which the Occupy movement kind of captured. But on the other hand, I really have no idea how to engage. You know, or I should say, not that I have no idea, but there's just longing. And I feel that longing in myself, and I also feel it in everybody. If people are really genuinely interested in kind of real progress, real solutions. So I'm in love.
Thank you, Liz. So now it's time to turn the longing over to you. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of, I guess, the lay of the land. We do have a Twitter feed happening here, and so I will be receiving signals at some point about questions being asked there. And also, I'm going to be inviting questions from the audience, and if you have a question that you'd like to direct in particular to someone here, then that's an invitation to do that. You want me to take something right now?
Sure.
Okay.
There's a question coming from Twitter that says, I'm loving the live video stream. How can the movement reach out to the 1%?
Okay. Can you hold that question just for a moment? I'm going to just say some more about how I'm going to moderate this evening, and then I'll take that question right away. There was one thing that really struck me in the film. I have been, I guess I'll call myself a starling gazer all of my life, and so what I'm proposing is a wild murmuration through the room in how the questions happen, and I'm sure that there's yearning that's happening everywhere, and I'm guessing that we might not even get to all of the questions. But here's what I'm hoping for and praying is that even if you don't get to ask a question with your own voice, your question will be asked and answered anyway. And if not, that the yearning will be very satisfying anyway. So, and also to keep questions as concise as possible, and to offer a beautiful, pure extraction of what it is that you're wanting to say. And if I do give myself the right to be like at the Oscars and do this, and possibly sing a song if it's necessary. All right. And, okay, a question here?
No, this is the roving mic.
Oh, this is the roving mic. One more thing. We have a roving mic, so when you have the question, please raise your hand and wait until the mic reaches you before speaking, and love the mic, which means you don't hold it out here, because no one will hear you. So you need to hold it here and love the mic. Okay. Let's take the Mary Lou, if you could repeat that question. That from Twitter.
How do we reach out to the 1%?
That was the question. How do we reach out? How does the movement reach out to the 1%?
Anyone who would like to take that question?
How does the movement reach out to the 1%? It's an interesting question because, you really, in some ways, have to define what is the 1%, right? And, clearly we've posited in the film that certainly there's and the Occupy movement posited that there's a 1% in terms of those that control our values as well in decision-making processes of political systems, things like that. So certainly that's a 1%. But we also try to get across in the film to look at what is 1% within all of us. Right? What is that part in us that is clinging to our certain viewpoint? What is the part that is, say, greedy or doesn't want to change? All these aspects, I think, that are reflected both in the culture at large and within ourselves. And so how do we reach out to the 1%, say, on both levels? I mean, I think that we have to examine ourselves, right? And certainly our own lifestyles, and certain ways that we're maybe living overconsumptively, or are we living from the heart, right? In almost everything we do, it's a challenge. And I don't think it's a challenge you can get to the end of, but you can certainly look at how you can align yourself within your own life towards what I would call like the culture of imagination, the culture of the heart. And I think that when we look at the processes in our government, things like that, there's certainly things that we can be pushing for, more representative political voting mechanisms, all these types of things, being more engaged with the types of policies that we want to see on that level as well. But I think ultimately demonstrating ourselves that one thing the Occupy said well is that we can't wait around, right, for the top-down structures to change. That we need to just start creating them ourselves. And even if they're destined for failure or what we could just call experimentation, that in itself will spark all the way up the chain of imagination, just like the rolling jubilee that the Occupy movement in Wall Street is doing now, where they're basically buying up debts and forgiving them. It is a phenomenal. And they, as I understand, last I checked, they've raised like millions of dollars to forgive. Sorry, they've raised hundreds of thousands to forgive millions of dollars in debt. And all the economists are like baffled. They're like, that makes no sense to their system. And I'll end with this: that Charles Eisenstein, who you saw in the film, he had an amazing statement. Actually, he was speaking in Vancouver a couple weeks ago at the Living the New Economy event. And there you go, there's a demonstration. But he said, People don't change their beliefs based on like information. They change their beliefs when they have an experience that doesn't fit into their worldview. And so how do we create experiences that don't fit into people's worldviews? That's the challenge.
Yeah, and I can just say that worldview is really the center of it, and it's cheap, but I think it gets right to the center of it, which is to say, we are the 1%. We have to actually view ourselves that way, and in fact, it's more true than not, isn't it? By virtue of the world population, we are the 1%. And so that's the worldview we need to have. We can flip that around, and we need to act rather than looking up at somebody else who's going to change something. We need to be proactive as if we are the 1%. So now, let's do it.
Yes, gentleman over there, at the back.
Circles round. And
That was a wonderful show. Thank you. Very happy to be watching it.
Closer, please.
How are you going to explain Occupy to the 99% in 5 words? What 5 words will facilitate the growth and understanding around Occupy?
Who wants to take that? Want to yourself?
Backwards.
How would you express the Occupy movement in 5 words, or how would you communicate it? Is that fair treatment of the question? Go to the 99%.
How are you going to facilitate the Occupy movement for 99%, for the 99%? 5 things that facilitate Occupy being understood and being embraced by the 99%. Because we are the 1%, right?
Okay. Well, I have 2 words which I could say that I think communicate more, I guess, the spirit of what the Occupy movement is, or in fact what it represents. And those 2 words are love virus. And I think it's important to think of the movement itself as an expression. Occupy is a, it's a temporary idea, or you could call it expression of a much larger impetus. And that, on some level, some people say, well, that was great, what happened, a year ago, but where are we now? And they're sort of missing the point. That this energy flows and it takes on different expressions at different times, just like we're seeing in the response to Sandy, that there's the occupiers there were able to respond intelligently and compassionately to the aftermath of Sandy. And they were actually outperforming like FEMA and the Red Cross because of the connections that they were making. And I think, how do you communicate it to the rest of the 99%? Showing up on a neighbor's doorstep with like rations or like helping them put the electricity back on, that's all you need to know about what the movement is or what they stand for. It's embodied in these actions. And so I think in that level, most people try to put it into their paradigm, but until you come in and you just embody it, I think that's where the change happens.
I think I also add engage and converse to those words. I'm not sure if that's really what the question was. It was a word. I think at first you said 5 words, maybe you meant 5 ideas, but just getting out and finding people that are like-minded and talking about it and thinking, and then moving towards action in some way, finding some need that needs to be fulfilled that you collectively come up with as an idea, and going for it, not thinking of the movement as somehow being out there, but it's in here.
I have 4 words, but the words really, it's the meaning behind the words, which you would say 99%. We are one family. And the challenge is, how do we make that so? How do we organically make that so? And I think that that has to start locally. I don't see any other way. I mean, I think all of us have connections, so locally in this world stretches quite far. But I should say not locally, I should say immediately. So that's how you make it real, right? So that means stretching your boundaries, exposing yourself to people that you might not want to communicate with. Oh, just a little bit, like one past reasonable. I think that's how it starts.
Question here in front. Get the mic. Can you put your hand up again? Thank you.
In a democratic situation, the 99% should be able to win any election. Do you think people are not voting because they fear having their dreams broken and their hearts crushed, or vice versa? And what do you think it will take to bring faith to enough people to just get everybody out to vote and have enough candidates running from the 99% to speak with the voice we want to hear? Yeah, that's a good question. You look at what happened in 2008 with Obama, and for many people, I mean, that rush of like, we can do it, yes we can, and all this stuff, they were really tapping into that energy. And if you've been down to the States, lately, it's a little different. There wasn't the sense of letdown. I think that when Obama got in there, all of a sudden everything didn't change like they wanted. And I think, I still believe that he got in there and was like, whoa, this is how it's really run. Right? So he couldn't actually do a lot of these things. And so there was an apathy, there was a disenfranchisement. And I also think that that's also partly why Occupy movement happened. A lot of people were kind of fed up that it was like the idea that you could just rally and get the right candidate in, and they did, but it didn't necessarily change that much. And so I think that in that system, that's the systemic understanding, the realizing, well, wait a second. It was kind of like, we voted for another guy, but it's still in a very narrow margin. I think I remember reading that if you look at Obama's policies now, he's even like farther right than Nixon. Like the whole center changed completely. So even so it's a complicated system there. Here, it's still a bit different. I think we're making headway with the Green Party. I mean, it's totally. And in the US, they don't have that alternative, right? So at least in Canada, we actually have these viable options. But I think people too fundamentally understand though that you can't just like vote in the future we want, right? Like it's going to take that front, but it's also going to take all of us actually creating these systems ourselves. So that's what I say.
We've got something coming from Velcro.
So from Velcro, he said, how to express the heart of Occupy? I love the phrase, hashtag mutual aid.
Mutual aid. Please bring the mic to the front.
This is a question specifically to filmmaker. Ian is a pretty incredible person, and I just wanted to ask, because I think it's really, really interesting, and the audience would love to hear, how is this film actually has changed you? What type of change have you actually made in your life because of getting involved in this work?
How has changed me as well? I mean, Velcro, working with Velcro, certainly taught me a lot as a veteran filmmaker. I say he taught me one of the most important lessons of film, which is when you're shooting, don't turn off the camera. We were kind of getting in trouble with police near the tar sand block, and at a certain point they told us to kind of get it back over the side of the road, which was supposed to be on. And I was, my sense is to turn it off, try to fix the situation. And later on, he's like, "Did you shoot it?" I'm like, "No, I turned it off." He's like, "What?" So he's definitely taught me a lot, not just that. But for me, I think what I recognize is, I think my role as a filmmaker is what I've learned. And that, I spent a lot of time at Occupy Vancouver. I was down at Occupy Wall Street. And what I realized is that in many ways the role of the artist in these cases is to, I think, take a way of seeing the movement, even a way that maybe the people within the movement can't articulate, but they can feel. And it's the artist's role to then take that and articulate it on their behalf, and then put that out in the world. And I think I saw that when I did a short piece called The Revolution is Love, with Charles Eisenstein, which ended up, a lot of people in the movement were saying, this is actually what I feel, but I didn't know it until you articulated it. And so I think for both Alvin and I, we realized that it's changed us and our understanding of the role, that how we can aid these movements is to reflect the best parts of these movements back on themselves, to then galvanize them to continue going. And I used to tell Occupy Vancouver, I said, I'll keep shooting if you keep occupying. And so it's a mutual relationship that I felt very privileged to be part of.
One of the things that really strikes me about the time that we're in is there's so many things which are now becoming urgent. The recent news on climate change and everything that's happening there is things are happening far faster than anybody's predicted. Action is now urgent. The political system is too slow. So are we now looking at a point where we really need to consider real revolution and taking politics into our own hands?
Well, I think that heightened sense of urgency is actually what got us here in the first place. And that's kind of the reason why Bush felt he needed to invade Iraq. And it's the reason why so many shortcuts get taken, because we can rationalize so many things on the basis of urgency. So in my school of thought, we have an expression called warriorship. And warriorship has to do with being willing to be involved but remain vulnerable. So it's kind of a combination of confidence and vulnerability at the same time. And so there's a sort of a sadness, there's a heartbreak that goes there, and you want to fix that. But in fact, we actually have to make friends with that. And that's actually how things can change. Because otherwise, there's always another rationale for urgency.
I think also that we need to have a sense of appealing to our meta-morality rather than, revolution is a really big word, and I'm not sure exactly what you meant by that, but I do think it is a time to appeal to those higher ideals, and in order to fix this, and that it might not always be congruent with notions that we, legal notions, etc., that we hold currently. but that it is a time to consider appealing to that other morality.
Maybe the last thing I'll add is that Occupy, really understood that it's not ideology, it's methodology. And that how we actually create these new types of processes, these new relationships, has to reflect the world that we actually want to live in. And so I think if we shortcut that, and that's exactly what all these other revolutions have done. Right? We kind of like skip that part and then hope that they'll build a better world after the revolution's over. And we know how that goes. So the urgency is just saying we need to do it, but we have to do it in the right way.
I think this is the revolution. At this basic human level of communicating and coming up with a new way.
So, can I ask you again, what were the two things you were putting in opposition? You said there was urgency and there was...
Oh, in opposition. Like I said, it's not ideology, it's methodology.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so if the methodology that everyone has here tonight, because you wouldn't be here, you would not be here if you were not a compassionate human being tonight. You could be at home watching TV, you could be at home with your lover making love, you could be sleeping, you could be doing some work on your internet, but you chose to come here tonight. So to me, it tells me that you are a compassionate human being, that you care about the other beings who are suffering and going through. So, okay, so that's one step. So the next step I come to is the methodology. So how do we move from the compassion that we feel in our hearts, probably everybody that is here tonight, how do we move to that next step? The methodology. The only clue I come up with right now when I ask the four of you, if you have some answer, how do we move from the compassion to the next stage? And the only clue I come up with is that I have to have some, like, clarity and one-pointedness, so I'm not just out there, like, you know how we all get when we're nervous or we're confronted? We get, like, irritable and we just bow off. How do we not do that? How do we speak in some kind of very respectful way that others will have to stop and say, wow, there's something that person is saying. It hits me somewhere, I know it's true. Okay, so I'm quiet. I would love to hear if any of you would say about what's after compassion.
I think building a community of resistance is a really big part of that. As Velcro showed in the film, that coming together is the antithesis of the bigger, nastier culture that we're being consumed by. And so just even beginning with creating the culture of resistance, of getting together, and then from that, evolving into, in my mind, one of the next steps is dealing with the crises of that, like, again, Velcro showed in the film, finding ways to address where the gaps are, where people are falling through the cracks, and to reach out to those people, not as an act of charity, but as Velcro was saying, as an act of mutual aid.
Yeah, I think for me that, on the one hand, I just want to maybe caution that there's a real danger and almost like, what's the word, like, it's easy to demonize our culture, right? This culture of consumption, as some call it, and its destructive nature, destructive tendencies. And I think it's really important, though, that we also look at the fact that this culture created many of us. It certainly created me, where I am. And there's a way of being with with the culture and honoring the parts of it that, again, brought us where we are today, but then recognizing the parts that we need to let go. And I think what comes after compassion is intimacy with ourselves, an understanding just what's kind of going on all the time. Michael Stone, who's a Buddhist yogi from Toronto, he spoke at Occupy Vancouver, and it became a short film that I created called Love and Shadow in the Occupy movement. And he had a beautiful way of saying that, like, most of us are not actually in our lives all the time, right? We're kind of elsewhere. And that if we were present for our lives, if we were actually intimate with what's going on, we would know what to do, right? We would know how to speak to people, or we would know what's actually going on for us. So if we cultivate the ability to be intimate with what's actually going on, then I think that is the starting place that we can communicate.
I'll just add to that what Charles was saying in the movie, was something about expanding the sense of oneself to include others. And so what I would say is to extend compassion and to kind of give it legs is really a matter of perspective, expanding perspective. So from the Buddhist point of view, the perspective, the real perspective, more accurate perspective is that we are actually highly connected. And so it's a matter of knowing what to do and knowing how to act becomes more obvious if we can kind of open up our perspective. And then the pathways kind of reveal themselves.
Velcro has something to add. Velcro reads,
you have a gift to unwrap, a mission to accomplish. Follow your heart, learn what makes it sing, and turn your compassion into action.
over at the back, the gentleman at the back, and I'm going to offer up, I know I'm not supposed to as the moderator, but I'm going to because you said the four of you, and I think you were including me when you said that. So I'm just thinking of David White's words when he says, the poet, David White, some of you know who is. This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is a time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. And so you can be feeding people by how you speak and the food you serve other people.
There's yet another website, VictoriaVoice.ca, is an organization that means we need to build a coalition in Victoria that's based on the Occupy Manifesto principles of ending debt, ending the strangulation of profit, ending mass material consumption, and ending exploitation. That was posted at the New York Occupy website throughout the struggle of being happening. How do you feel about those four principles?
The four principles: ending debt,
profit, mass material consumption, and exploitation.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's very simple. We have to make friends with ourselves on a much deeper level, because it is the sense that we have to get something outside and bring it in all the time that drives all of those things. Yeah.
I think that we look at things like ending debt, and one of the things I understand or have come to realize I don't understand is when I really look deeply into something. And when I look at things like the economic system that we currently have, it is a highly complex system that has been modified little bits over time. And many, many other writers such as Charles Eisenstein in his book Sacred Economics speak much more eloquently on that. But I guess what I've come to appreciate is that a lot of issues that we face, like in some sense, they're there because they're actually really hard to change within the current system. A lot of people have tried. And that any massive shifts, I mean, they'll always come with a much larger ripple or tearing of the fabric of society. So it just made me realize that the solutions we need, I mean, they have to be creative, but they also have to be to look at how complex the system really is. I think we're starting to see this with things like, I was in San Francisco recently, and there's like an explosion of sharing sites that are doing really amazing things with, tapping into, you can rent somebody's, unused apartment or their car, all these different aspects, like you can sleep on their couch, and so all these different ways, in particular in the economic realm, that people can build a relationship without actually changing money. Some of those services were money and some weren't. Charles speaks a lot about the gift economy, and how do we incorporate that back into our lives. And so, in some ways, like he speaks around the money system, that it's not the fact that the money system itself, that we're using money per se, it's that money is colonized almost every relationship that we actually have. And like, what if we just dial back a certain amount of the relationships that are currently monetized and put them back into the realm of, again, mutual trust and responsibility and gifting? Certainly our lives would be way, way, way richer. And the things that are actually better served for things like money continue that way. So, I mean, the rest of the principles, I mean, I think it's definitely a bigger conversation, but that's what I'd like to add to that.
Any burning questions? Okay, we have Mr. Oliver Swain.
The concept of horizontalism and love and, within the movement, as it was functioning in the squares in the Occupy movement, there was an environment where sort of all issues and topics were open for discussion. And that was sort of the nature of that movement. But I've noticed that with the methodology of consensus decision making, it kind of breaks out no matter what the motivation for the people being together in the first place was. For instance, when we were doing the peace camp here for environmental protection of our rainforests, we were there for a very specific reason, but as soon as we got into consensus decision making, we soon found that all the serious social issues that were important to everyone that was there was suddenly a point for discussion. We would have these incredibly long meetings about what we were going to do tomorrow, and they would involve discussions around gender and race and history, and all these things would sort of come out in the wash. These discussions were really powerful and really important, and what made them, I think, so useful and allowed us to go in so many different places, as I saw in the Occupy movement, was that we were face to face. And so emotions, tears could come, different kind of embraces could follow passionate exchanges. And so within this idea of horizontalism and love, how do you guys see that functioning outside of the nucleus of those face-to-face environments? Do you see it as, do you see that as being the essential nucleus? And if not, how do you see it functioning outside of that nucleus of face-to-face people, in the square or on the picket line or on the blockade?
So, at the back, response from Velcro? Okay.
Sorry, response from Velcro.
Well, it's actually a good night from Velcro. Velcro's in New York City, which is 3 hours ahead. He's kind of fading, and so he wanted to just sort of sign off. He said that together we're creating a revolution, and I think that he's watching the live stream. If we can just say, thank you, Velcro, and bye, wave goodbye or something like that. We're saying, Maya, we love you, thanks for making the film, and thanks for joining our third chat. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, good question. I think I heard a lot of that too. Like, basically, there's a paralyzing nature sometimes, right, of what the initiative tried to get through. And I think that's also goes along with the experimentation of the model, right? That there was a lot that was learned, a lot that probably could have been tweaked. As I understand, that's why we broke up from the Exposed Council, and to try to figure out, what is the best model for this types of decision making. And I think that your question around, can it actually even survive beyond the sort of face-to-face interaction? And I think what we're also seeing is an experimentation of like the type of effective units that we have in our society, right? Because what I've been finding is that I'm with a group in Vancouver, a smallish group, like around 12, 15 people, that we came together after the Occupy movement to essentially just figure out like how would a dynamic group work together that actually build trust among each other, help each other out with their projects, help each other, again, organize either social activist events, galvanize other people. And what we're finding is that, there is an undeniable power face-to-face and building that sort of human connection with people. And I think that our societies of the future, our communities of the future will actually do this. They'll actually be groups that you can come together of all different age, gender, all this stuff that you can work with on a small scale, which then works together with larger groups, and then works together with larger groups. So it's this kind of hybrid mini organizational structure that I think mimics much closer to how nature operates. And I think we're having a lot of interesting discussions now about understanding like the innate intelligence of nature and its ability to essentially coordinate and feed every living thing in the ecosystem, but nobody's in charge. Right? I mean, it's phenomenal when you think about it. I'm taking a permaculture course right now, and it's like blowing my mind every time I do it. And I think that understanding that like shifting that hierarchical model, that the only way to make change is to sort of do this top-down application of force. I think that's one of the big revolutions, as Jeremy Rifkin says so well. That's what we're experimenting with. And I think we're not quite there yet, but we have clues that are popping up all over the place within Occupy, within open source technology movements, in nature itself, the startups. Like we're seeing these clues, but we haven't quite put them together. But I think we will.
Well, I was just going to say that having the conversation itself is that a lot of times we are thinking about what the result is going to be, or how effective we're going to be with accomplishing something that we can sort of hold up. But the conversation itself is a powerful occurrence. I think that we need to respect that and who we engage in the conversation. And because when you're having a conversation, there's there's just an increase in awareness, understanding the different points of view. And it can be within a small, homogeneous group, but it also could be, you can start bringing in some people from, the other percentages, which is a powerful thing in itself.
The nature of consensus decision-making, of course, is that when you come up with a decision, it's a good one, and everybody's on board, completely on board. There's no holding back, and that can be really powerful. And of course, to figure out ways that we can incorporate that in a broader context is kind of what I hope we're all striving for. And that said, I just feel like that there's a little something that I'd like to add to that about what happened in the square here. If anybody participated in any of those, I mean, it was really complicated, and I think it really took us a long time to figure out what was happening there. Why was it so difficult? And I think that, as time passed and maybe, hindsight, I think one thing we weren't recognizing or addressing was that, the beauty of this kind of movement of occupation was that you bring a disparate group of people into the square, and what happens is that everybody gets to see how everybody else's lives kind of are, and get to know each other. And of course, it also means that the more privileged middle class get to see how really terrible and desperate it is to be at the other end of the spectrum. And so I think that what we weren't really addressing in that context was that people are in crises, and it's really difficult to, and I think that's what we're seeing too. We have these really long conversations in the decision-making process that just go on and on and on, because there's a lot of ground to cover, and sometimes that's not even possible. And I think that's, for me, that's why we really have to start looking at where people are in crises and addressing crises, addressing that people are suffering from mental illness in our streets, and to expect them to, that they're wanting to engage in our assemblies without even their basic needs fulfilled. That there's people hungry, and you can't expect that they're going to be able to come with the same sort of, not even skills. I think it's just peace to be able to come and have the conversation and have to deal with that crisis, as well as all these other things.
Probably have time for one more question, if anybody has one. Yes?
It's okay, there's a lady over there who hasn't had it.
All right.
Okay, so, what you just said, spoke to me quite loudly, because I was down there and observed the frustration when the conversations were not able to go forward in how many people wanted them to. And the question I have is, how do you move forward when the element that is in control of the movement, the direction of the movement, hasn't got its basic needs met? How do you move forward? Because the frustration level was huge.
I look at it as, break it down. If you're a smaller group of people and someone is coming to the table, you've got a kid coming to the table and they haven't eaten all day and they're super cranky. What do? You feed them. If somebody comes to the table and they've just had some major horrible thing happen to them in their lives and they're not coping, what do? You give them a hug, you help them through whatever it is that they need to be helped with. And, it just seems plain to me, I think that we're seeing this with the Occupy Sandy, is when people are in crisis, you move towards that crisis. And maybe, and in doing that, I think we will build a lot of, that culture of resistance, that solidarity with each other. We will be known as, the movement that deals with that stuff. And I hope that that's how we will grow.
So that means that becomes the first priority. But parallel to that, there are other decisions that need to be made, like how you're going to deal with the police, what you're going to do with the money.
Well, I think in any situation, there isn't just one priority, and that there's a lot of us, and that we can do it all. We're doing it all right now in a way, right? There's a lot of things that go on in the world. There's a lot of people here, and I don't think we have to necessarily look at it as in any situation that this has to be the priority, or just this or just that. We can do both or all. I mean, maybe not all at once, but hopefully we'll get there.
Well, I would say it's a wrap. A number of people are getting their coats on and leaving, so I would like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I would like to thank Michelle Buchanan, Ian McKenzie, and Wade Matthews for offering I just think it's a really good thing for us to go home and think about, and not just think, but feel deeply, which is brokenheartedness. I think it's a skill worth cultivating at a time like this. So, something I'm really very interested in. So I don't have any business card, but if anybody wants to know more, it's just down here. And I also want to thank Mandy for making this happen.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. A big round of applause for Rochelle. .ca in case you're interested. And a big thank you to Dave, Ian, to Michelle, and a great conversation. Thank you all. Thank you to the students. Thank you all. We have wonderful piece of business. Thank yous to our speakers from Global Village Store. They offer us speaker gifts for our speakers as thank yous. I'm going to pass this around. Take one. I don't know what it is. Want to know. But it's just for you guys. So big round of applause. Thank you. And heal and work with your broken hearts. Thank you so much. I hope to see you in January.